Gina Hoke, who you may know from the CannaMama Clinic. We are discussing pot and pregnancy with a woman that's been living through this whole experience. You've lived it. You're the mother of more than one?
Yeah, I have 2 children. I used cannabis through both of my pregnancies. Completely through my second pregnancy, I didn't ever stop, but about a few weeks into my first one, because I was having a lot of complications, and I tried 2 different medications with doctor recommendation that did not work. And when I was threatening miscarriage is when I said, you know what, I'm going back to cannabis, because cannabis always helped me eat. So, and lo and behold, it worked, and I've been an advocate ever since.
So threatening miscarriage, that's the point that you were at when you decided to consider cannabis during your pregnancies?
Yes, I had an ER doctor basically tell me that if I didn't get it under control, that I was likely to lose this pregnancy. And I have a history of miscarriage prior to my son's conception. So I didn't mess around. I was I wanted to be a mom. He was very haunted. It was very scary. And I was at the point where I was willing to try anything.
And so what were the medications that you were prescribed like?
They just didn't work. I didn't have like nasty side effects or anything like that. They just didn't stop my nausea. I had the HG and hyperemesis gravidarum. They say it, everybody just knows that it's the evil monster HG. And I couldn't do anything. I couldn't go to school. I was a student. I had a part-time job, and I couldn't work. Everything in my life was just disrupted by puking. So I was, like I said, I was told by an ER doctor finally that it was like the last straw. He didn't tell me to use cannabis. It was me. Like, I went home from the ER and lit up right away.
And so what did he tell you that kind of let you know I need to start searching for a different answer that I'm not going to find here in the doctor's office?
Well, I didn't really search. I mean, I've been a cannabis consumer since I was about 13. I started right before 8th grade, and I always just found it helpful. I've always suffered from different eating issues, not necessarily like anorexia or bulimia or anything like that, but I have IBS, and it was undiagnosed until recently. So I've always had issues with eating, and I think it was instinctual. I think Mama Bear was already out. Like, what do I have to do? How can I help myself? The medications aren't working. The doctors have no answers. I've been put on bed rest. I've had miscarriages prior. Like, what can I do? And I knew cannabis always worked for me. So I was the mom that listened to everybody. Cannabis is a drug. You have to quit it. I didn't use caffeine. I didn't eat lunch meat, or sushi or any of it. I listened to all the recommendations. I followed the book. I read what to expect when you're expecting, front and back, and now I roll my eyes so hard at myself.
Why is that?
Because I've just learned so much as a mother, and that book is just scary for first-time moms. It burns you against so much stuff. And so I did everything that I thought I was supposed to do to be like this awesome pregnant person, that just wanted to bring her child into the world. So I quit smoking cannabis immediately when I found out I was pregnant. It was it was a no-brainer. And then, like I said, when I was told I was threatening miscarriage again, it was like, I'll do anything, whatever. Cannabis worked in the past. If I'm going to try it. Worst that could happen, what's the worst that could happen? I'm already threatening miscarriage. And it immediately turned my life around. I was able to start eating again. I stopped fighting with my roommates about the food they were cooking. I went back to school. I was working again. Like, everything changed for me. And, my son is almost 13.
And so did you see any negative impacts that cannabis may have had on your pregnancy or baby?
Not at all. And with my first pregnancy, I did stop consuming. I guess I was like 7 or 8 months pregnant. I'm not really sure. I don't remember. It was so long ago. But again, scare tactics, things I read. I was afraid that his brain was going to be affected negatively if I didn't stop consuming at like a certain time. And, don't ask me where I got the source or whatever. But like I said, I was just very soaking up any knowledge and not wanting to harm my child.
And so let's take a minute to pause and discuss the kind of information that was out there, because that is what led you to CannaMama Clinic. So what were those concerns that led you to stop consuming?
So I read that there was going to be issues with the synapses forming in the brain. And so I was concerned that, he would have like thought process problems. I was only 22. So I not to discredit, there's plenty of amazingly smart 22-year-olds. I consider myself probably an all right, 22-year-old, but I was very young, impressionable, didn't have a lot of resources, didn't have a support system. I mean, I didn't even really know about Facebook mommy groups. I literally had no one to ask, what am I doing? And my doctors knew that I consumed cannabis, but they were of the same mind that they would have asked me to quit cigarettes. A slow process of quitting, not cold turkey. They didn't want to shock the fetus, is what they told me. But
treating it like cigarettes.
Yeah, they wanted me to get off as I could. Still looking at it as a negative, even though I have credited with helping the pregnancy proceed past the miscarriage point that all my prior pregnancies had failed at.
And so none of them took that into consideration with them telling you were about to miscarriage if things didn't change and suddenly you're carrying your baby to full term?
No, absolutely not. And, I saw a team of doctors. That's just kind of how my doctor's office worked. And so one of the doctors was a little bit more lenient, maybe two of the doctors, and then one of the doctors was super absolutely not. And I saw him even in my second pregnancy, and I ended up lying to him in my second pregnancy. Sorry, Dr. Cohen, if you have this. I told him I quit my second one because I just didn't want to deal with the BS. I was confident that cannabis had helped me so much through my first pregnancy, and I breastfed with my son. After the 6-month mark, again, I was really scared, so I was waiting, and then I finally was like, okay, I'll do a little bit, and I saved up breast milk, and I pumped out. I did things so differently with my first child than with my second one, where cannabis was concerned, based on my lack of knowledge. And going back to your question, there just wasn't a lot out there. The research that we have prior to, my son was born in 2005, it's all negative pretty much. And other rare research, but I don't recall reading that at that time. So I don't know what finally, swayed me one way or another. I guess it was just maternal instinct.
And so you said you didn't see any negative impacts on your child, but what about society? I've dealt with a whole bunch, mostly since opening CannaMama Clinic. I was not drug tested with my son, but I was drug tested with my daughter. And like I said, I lied to my doctor, but I was foolish enough to be honest with the ER nurse prior to my labor, and she actually noted in my file to test me upon delivery. So, I've been with CPS and over cannabis 4 or 5 times now, I think. Wow.
Yeah, and the last one, yes, in Denver, with Jefferson and Denver County, actually. But the last time was over smoking cannabis in front of my daughter. So that was recently, last year.
Tell us about the CannaMama Clinic.
So I opened CannaMama Clinic after I wrote an article about my experience with giving birth to my daughter and being drug tested in the hospital and just basically terrorized. I wouldn't say it was intentional terror. They weren't trying to make me fear for my child and have my child taken away from me. However, anytime a parent hears CPS is getting involved, I think that's going to be the first thing that you fear, as you should. There have been plenty of legal kidnappings in this country. I was drug tested. I came out positive. She came out negative, and we had a social worker come and speak with us a couple times in the hospital room, but we weren't even allowed to be discharged until the social worker cleared us.
Wow.
So it was not the typical experience, and it was a negative experience for a new mom. And it made me realize later on, it took me about a year to process what exactly had happened to me and my family. And I was actually calling a doctor and was talking about setting up a new appointment with a new doctor, and they were getting my health background. I was explaining that I use cannabis as medicine, and first off, the person on the phone didn't even know what I was talking about. I had to switch back to marijuana or weed, and then they were very negative about it. And I hadn't even made the appointment with the doctor yet, so it was like, it was a struggle. And I just realized I wanted to write this article and kind of come out of the closet and explain what had happened to me and what I'd learned has been happening to other women, because I started a Facebook group, a private one, and we called it Cannabis Consumption and Peaceful Parenting. But it was just like this little secret thing, and I would invite women that I thought maybe use cannabis on the sly, and we would talk about our experiences. And I started over time, more and more people were joining, more people had friends that they were inviting. Mm-hmm. And I realized there was no support system. It just did not exist.
Were you hearing stories similar to yours?
Yes, absolutely. Without a doubt, hundreds. And now it's grown to thousands upon thousands. And I mean, if anybody follows my Facebook page or my Instagram account, you can read testimony of people that will leave comments saying the same exact thing. And you asked about if my kids have been negatively influenced affected or had any kind of negative side effects. And like, my son is an honor student, and he's about to be in the 8th grade. And I know that's just anecdotal evidence, but I hear that all the time. GT, honor student, ahead of the class, super bright. And I'm actually about to speak at the International Cannabis Research Conference over in Pueblo. It's at Pueblo, Colorado State University. And I'm going to give some of my own personal research. We've been able to poll my group and talk a little bit about their experiences being pregnant and breastfeeding. And pregnant and breastfeeding, consuming cannabis and breastfeeding. And I'm going to go ahead and do another poll before I speak to get a fresh perspective and ask some questions specifically regarding pregnancy and cannabis consumption.
Mm-hmm. So the conversation, people are at least being open to it. I know the first time I had you on to talk about this, it felt like you were kind of spearheading this whole pot should be used for women that need it while pregnant. Like, that is your stance, and you were one of the only people that I knew that were willing to say that. And this is just a couple years ago, years after legal weed.
It's blown up since then. I know there are several other women that now speak publicly about being pregnant and consuming or using while breastfeeding. I do have a problem with several of them, though, however, because they pick and choose which CannaMamas they want to support. And I've actually faced a lot of backlash in the last year from women in the cannabis industry who have basically said that I'm hurting the industry and hurting the movement by supporting these women who choose to consume actually while they're breastfeeding. And I don't mean like consume and then 20 minutes later breastfeed. Like, there's a picture that went around and the woman was actively hitting the bong while she was breastfeeding her child, and she got an incredible amount of backlash and lack of support, and I chose to support her. Which
is that? Are you concerned about secondhand like smoke near baby? If baby's like on the titty, I'm sure the bong wasn't a 6-footer. So why choose to support that if you are choosing to champion such an important issue? Is the controversial stuff necessary to get your message across?
I don't think it is necessary in that picture. Well, actually, let me take a step back. Actually, I do. Sometimes I do put controversial pictures out there on purpose because I want the conversation to get started. But this picture actually was shared in a private space that wasn't even mine. And somebody lifted it and then sent it out, and it went viral. And this woman was like bombarded and had no idea what to do. So I just kind of came to her defense. But, you know, when I really had to look at it and think about it, it's something I don't know necessarily. I can't remember ever hitting a bong while I was nursing, but it's something I'm like, I can't say I wouldn't do it. I know my partner used to vape while nursing. And the thing is that we don't know why she made that decision. And there are people that I have spoke with since that picture went public and went viral, actually, because I was even interviewed by a reporter from Australia over that picture. So it like literally went viral. And for me, it is a matter of not knowing the whole story, and how there are plenty of women that have told me about things that I hadn't even thought of why that they would consume cannabis in the act of nursing.
Right.
You know, PTSD and sexual traumas, and it actually helps them relax enough to the point where...
Wow, I would have never thought of that.
I didn't either. I didn't have that problem. I was very, very fortunate to have a very easy breastfeeding relationship with my children. You know, I breastfed like over 50 months or something like that with both of my children, and I didn't really have any problems. So that wouldn't be something that just immediately was thought of. And I think that unless you've been in those shoes and you can absolutely 100% say this is going to harm these children, I think people need to take a step back, especially as cannabis and it claiming to be, you know, and self-proclaimed activists, cannabis,
right.
women who choose to consume cannabis while pregnant and breastfeeding. Like, if you're going to choose that group of people to support, how about actually support them? There is no reason to write articles shaming these women or going on to, you know, their personal Instagram or Facebook pages and slamming these women. Have support, because I know it's controversial and it might not be the decision we make, but as an activist for cannabis, it's super important that we don't have CPS workers choosing this cannabis and this one. Oh, well, she was pregnant and consumed cannabis, but tisk, 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 she shook her finger at you. So why, you know what I mean? Does that make sense? We do not need people in the industry claiming to be supportive of us as a group.
Judging different subsects or judging people.
Judging and giving the negative, giving the anti-cannabis prohibitionists another something to have against us, to use against us.
I like that.
Don't need it. So please, like, I'm so glad you gave me this platform today, because I've been aching somewhere bigger than myself to go and say, like, please think about what you're doing to CannaMamas. This is not just about your opinion. There are women facing major legal repercussions for making choices that you may just not understand.
No, I think something that's come up again and again, and it's come up in this conversation, is the fact that you CannaMamas are doing what you can that you think is best for baby. Like you said, you were at the point where you were possibly going to lose your son before you decided to do this. And this is, you know, just a recurring theme. I'm doing what I think is best for my baby. It's not like I'm out here just trying to get high and take really controversial pictures. So I applaud you for taking the step to support someone and listen to her story before just hopping on the anti-bandwagon that is so easy to get caught up in.
And I would like to speak to that point just really quick.
Yeah.
You know, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a nurse. I can't necessarily speak to what scientifically do we know or what's going to happen to your baby.
But the thing is, who is outside of the women that are experiencing it? There is no one. Someone, we posted we were going to be talking about this on Instagram, and someone was like, well, I'm excited to hear about the studies. I'm sure there's a lot of information. There's not.
There's not, and this is my platform. I'm a political scientist, and I have been trained to read research methods and be able to look at studies and examine them myself. I can do that. That's fine, but that's not exactly my platform or how I explain why we should have the right to do it. I explain we should have the right to do it because every woman has the right to choose their medicine while pregnant and breastfeeding. And cannabis is medicine, and cannabis is no different. And we do not have any research that shows that it's going to do anything like extremely harmful or even more harmful than drugs that are already prescribed for cannabis, for pregnant and breastfeeding women.
One of the things that I love to shine a light on this is after reading some of the potential side effects that are proven to happen with some of the most common morning sickness medicines, including malformed limbs.
Yes.
Why would you not try a plant before risking your child not having legs?
Yes, absolutely, and heart defects. Or I actually have spoken with CannaMamas who had heart defect issues with using Zofran and then switched to cannabis in later pregnancies with no issue. And that kind of stuff is sad. And it goes back to choice. Women have the choice. Do they want to use the Zofran? Do they want to pick the Benergen? Do they want to pick the cannabis? It's their choice, their body, their fetus, their baby.
Should be their choice.
It should be. And right now we are still having, and think about the resources. We're having women drug tested during their pregnancy, after the babies are born. We're having them investigated by CPS, having CPS workers look into their home, investigate their families, interview their friends and family. And that's time spent away from children that are actually neglected and actually need the government's assistance and help. And I testified about a year or two ago. I don't remember. I set the time. I lose track. About and this was before a Senate committee hearing here in Colorado, and I testified with CPS actually about changing the laws with the way that CPS has to investigate cannabis consuming parents, because they don't want to necessarily have to investigate every single one of us that consume while pregnant or breastfeeding and have our children test positive. It's clogging up their system.
And so what advice would you give to a pregnant mom that is looking for a solution, but I would say 99% are concerned about the stigma that is connected to them consuming cannabis to alleviate real symptoms?
So we still recommend lying. I know that sucks, and we can't wait for the day that we can tell women to be honest with their healthcare providers. But it is that serious. Like, if you want to avoid the whole CPS thing, like, you need to, stay under wraps as much as possible. And also looking for providers that are cannabis friendly. But we are trying to start a network. We created files within our little private groups, but I don't have them up on my internet, on my website yet. And that is like my big goal, is to actually help get kind of like an underground railroad, if we can keep it between ourselves and pass along names of providers who will positively react to our choice to consume cannabis while pregnant and breastfeeding. It's a big deal.
And so lying is the first piece of it.
Lying, midwives are often more likely to be friendly, cannabis friendly, and also home birthing. Home birthing is like a huge way to avoid the stigma and the hospital policies. It sucks, but it's true.
And the hospital policies are that they are required to take your drug and test for any of the substances, and while they might be looking for meth or cocaine or something that might actually harm baby, if cannabis comes up, even in a legal state, the first legal state like Colorado, they have to report it to CPS.
That's right. And this is not across the board. So this is what even is more difficult, is I also tell pregnant women and clients that come to me, is that they need to do their research. They need to be calling their providers anonymously and asking, I need to see where in the lines, where in the policy is it going to tell me if you drug test me, where do I sign? Because a lot of time people don't realize they're giving their consent away, but they are in other paperwork they're signing. Because face it, how many people read every single line of all the paperwork they get when they're admitted? Right. You know what I mean? So that's something that I highly recommend, is making sure that you know exactly what's going to happen to you, what your hospital's policy actually is.
So those are good tips. Let me hop over to the comment section. We have a lot of Go Ginas, a lot of hashtag CannaMamas.
Thank you.
I know Ashley says, our social worker left when I passed a drug test and had a spliff before it drinks. Okay, we'll be talking about passing drug tests next week, and the show is live for all of you that are watching, new to what we're doing, so I'm reading these comments live for the first time. Pedro says, I'm going through the same thing with cops. They actually took my son for 2 years. Whoa.
Oh my God, heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking. The thing is that we know that there are cases where that's happened in other states, where children were removed just for simple cannabis consumption, and they were actually harmed, sexually abused, killed in the hands of their foster foster homes or wherever they take these poor kids. So, I mean, when you look at what are the possible effects of maybe secondhand smoke, for instance, and versus being sexually abused in your foster care, there's a no-brainer there.
It's horrible to even think about. Paula says, thank you for discussing PTSD and breastfeeding. It isn't something a lot of people consider, but being able to consume cannabis to avoid those emotions coming up over and over and over is tremendously helpful.
Yes, and I've heard it helps with letdown, and there's just so many things that I hadn't even thought of. Maybe I should write a blog about that, actually.
You should. This is like, that's like the first thing, and I try and be as open as possible just because I know how quickly people want to run to judge you for what they just see on the surface. So I totally get that. But that didn't stop me from when you mentioned a mom smoking a bong while breastfeeding. The first thing I think is, I need to talk to this mom. Exactly. I need to have a conversation with this mom.
Everybody's like, why can't they just wait till they're done or give it a few minutes or everything? I mean, this mom the baby is a newborn. You can tell just by looking at the back of the baby's head because that's really all you can see. And I can think of so many reasons why I wouldn't want to get up and down to go hit a bong, or, I barely moved when I had my newborn. I had all my stuff like around me, propped, pillow, like I'm leaking everywhere. You have a wound, you don't want to move. Sorry, my cat decided to join us. And so I get it. I did get it. And it took me a minute to think about it too. Not necessarily with the judgment, but how I was going to deflect the haters, because I really had to have a coherent and logical argument, which for some people it didn't work. And I think what was most disappointing is the people that are in the cannabis industry and are cannabis activists who still didn't want to hear it. They're like, well, that's my opinion, too bad.
Well,
and I'm like,
get the wrong way.
Yeah, that's not how we do it. Like, please have a seat because you're not helping.
I love that. Preach. I love connecting with you. You keep it all the way real. You are really championing a cause that's so incredibly important, and I encourage you to just go and look through all of these comments. So many people just commenting that they stand with you from all of these different corners of the world. You too. Where can people find more information? We have CannaMama Clinic too, tagged in the description.
That's my Facebook. I'm on Instagram. I have a blog at polyscimommy.com, and that's short for political science, so it's polyscimommy.com. I'm still working on my website. I know, I'm sorry, but I hate website work, and it's
a lot, girl.
Awful. And it's really like, everybody's like, oh, well, I'll get you a website designer. I'm like, no, I actually have a fabulous one. It's all me. So I take responsibility. So if you need, hit me up on one of my pages, email me, Gina at CannaMama Clinic, or excuse me, that one's down actually. Sorry, CannaMamaClinic@gmail.com. But I'm around, I'm not hard to find. So
please. Is the link in the description a good one?
Yeah, that's our main Facebook page. So unless Facebook decides to shut us down again, we should be good. We went over 20,000 organic followers in less than a year, and they killed it for cannabis promotion. So,
well, that's the week show. We'll see how long we get this run going. But Gina, thank you so much for making time for this. Thank you for the work that you're doing, because it takes someone with like a brass set of ovaries to come through and fight like how you've been since before I've known you, and you don't seem to be slowing down.
No, I'm not, and neither do you. And thank you so much for the work you do too as well, Charlo.
Absolutely. I'll text you after I get done with the show.
Bye.
That was Gina Hoke of the CannaMama Clinic. Thank you all so much for being an active part of this conversation. We are going to continue our celebration of Women's Month when we wrap up Women's Month week on the Weed Show tomorrow with part 2 of Pot and Pregnancy. We're going to be talking with Kira Faye on different consumption methods to use while pregnant and her own experience, because it's a really important conversation to have. We're pretty much the only place having it, and no one experience is everyone else's. So I can hear myself talking. That was weird. So I'm going to get into that tomorrow. I hope all of you will join. And again, thank you so much for being actively involved in today's conversation. That joint's probably gone, huh?
I rolled a wood.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Ooh, I'll spark a wood.
You can have a joint.
I'll spark a wood. I'll definitely spark this wood. I got the flames. Yes, already sparked. So okay, I got the wood, the Twax joint. I'll show both of you that with the zank of the zizzy. Hello. Okay, that's this. So there's the Twax joint. There's like the last half of the backwood. It is as big as a finger. That's not an optical illusion. So I'm gonna go ahead and puff pass as you all insisted I do. So let me do that. Again, thank you so much, Gina. You are the dopest. All of our guests this week have been amazing. Jennifer Joy on Monday, Ashley Man to the Cannasexual on Tuesday, just yesterday, and Gina Hoke of the CannaMama Clinic. Thank you all so much. Now you got to get back to work.
It's working.
I gotta go. I'm definitely coughing after this.